Welcome along to Tweed Street Occupied Scotland, home of the satirical saltire. I'm Cinnamon Bridges, aka Peter. And with me this evening, with me this evening, where do I begin? Because this evening we've got a safeguarding affirmative panel. And I'm just going to run through the names. With me this evening we have Kevin Lister. So I'll say hi to each as we go along. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for your time this evening.
My pleasure.
Maren, I'll say hi to Maren Smith. Hi, Maren.
Hi there. Hi.
Richie Herron. Hi, Richie.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Shelley Charlesworth.
Hello there.
Hi, Shelley. Caroline McAllister.
Good evening.
Good evening, Caroline. We've got Lee from SOS Scotland. Hi, Lee. We've got James Esses joining us as well. James, hi. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And of course, we've got a co-host and regular attender on Tweed Street, Farah Hamid, joining us. Hi, Farah. How you doing, pal?
I'm good, Peter. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. Thanks very much for joining us. Right. So without further ado, we're here this evening because we have a wee bit of concern with regards to the topic of sex and gender and safeguarding and children's rights, parents' rights, women's rights, a lot of things all coming into under one umbrella. So I thought it'd be best if we could try and get people from areas of expertise pertaining to all of this to come together and try and answer some questions. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Kevin Lister, who's going to be the first person to speak this evening. The format that we have is each guest will speak for 4 minutes. They will tell us a wee bit about themselves, why they're here and why they're getting involved. Then we'll go to a group discussion, and with us being online, we'll try and take some questions for people that are joining us either on YouTube or on Facebook to answer some questions that you may have. So first of all, I'm going to come to Kevin. Kevin, over to you, and I'll just put you on the main screen. And just start whenever you're ready, Kevin.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on the panel, and I'm sharing the panel with some people who've been in this fight for a lot longer than I have. So I'm certainly the new kid on the block. Briefly about me, I've been in teaching for 18 years. I've been teaching maths, A-level and further maths and computing science. I came into teaching, kind of part of my career plan was to move into teaching around about 40. So I came into teaching in 2003, which was somewhat at the time when Tony Blair had made his education his 3 priorities. And there was a real sense of optimism for education at that time. And as I look back there and I look at the situation that I am in now, I wonder how things have got to the point that they've got to today in the education system, how those ideals have been completely shattered. But I still hold on to those values that were espoused then. I think the 2 things that education must do is it must teach truth, and it must teach truth safely. And what we're seeing now is that the transgender culture has completely destroyed those 2 underlying principles. There's now no longer an observance to truth, and we throw in any idea of maintaining safety basically out the window. And the reason I'm here now is that I raised 2 safeguarding concerns in relatively short succession. One was about a student of mine who wanted to transition from female to male. So I raised a safeguarding concern immediately, and I asked 3 questions. Did we have parental consent? Was the student making an informed decision? And was there a risk that she could self-medicate with cross-sex hormone treatment? The college decided that they would not contact the parent, and that was following the advice of the transgender activist teachers that we had in the college, who are fearful for outing students to the parents. And that's a catastrophic structural safeguarding failure. The second safeguarding concern I raised in some ways was even more serious. and it related to staff in the college who were actively encouraging and directing students down towards transgender pathways. The teacher in concern had boasted and put it in writing that she had directed 4 students to transition. And when she told me that, I was virtually sick on the spot. But that was the first time when I realized what was happening, that I, as a teacher, was getting concerned about what was happening to my students. And at that point, I then realized that structurally, the college was actually encouraging students to transition at the same time. So I could see then why the college was deliberately choosing not to inform the parents, because they were culpable with the actions that were taking place. That ultimately led to my dismissal. The college didn't uphold the safeguarding investigations at all, and I'll be taking the college to court, to the employment tribunal, and we've got solicitors and barristers now working on building that case. But there's a number of big things that I now sort of reflect on, and that kind of coming clear to me from this case. One is the huge momentum that is now built up behind the schools to keep pursuing the transgender doctrine. And one of the great concerns I've got now is that we have things like the Caste Review. We've had things like the Suella Braverman speech. We've had things now like mermaids and the mermaid scandal, but nothing is actually changing yet on the ground. And I think this is a problem that's going to run, and it's going to find itself running for a long, long time. I think these battles that we're all involved in, and the campaign that we're all pushing forward, is not something that's going to be sorted and resolved anytime soon. I think we need to be getting ready for the long term now.
Absolutely.
I think that's my 4 minutes, is it?
Yeah, if that's you, I was giving you a wee bit of grace there, Kevin. But if that's you,
thank you very much.
You're happy with that?
I've got a list of other things, but I'll talk about those later on. I won't steal anybody else's thunder at this time.
Excellent, Kevin. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Caroline McAllister, over to you. Your 4 minutes, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Peter. I got into this around 2016, 2017. I'd seen bits and pieces online before it, but I think it was around 2017 that I really engaged. And what I found quite shocking was I saw a trans person speak out and oppose some of the gender ideology that was going on. And the abuse that they received was quite shocking, actually. And that was what really made me stop and think, okay, I think there's more to this than meets the eye. Because if this is about trans rights, why are you abusing a trans person? It didn't make sense to me. The other thing that really caught my attention, I've worked with vulnerable adults for the past 30 years, predominantly women, predominantly survivors of child sex abuse and or domestic violence. And as I started to become more familiar with what the implications of all of this meant, I was absolutely horrified, because everything I do, my practice from the first day that I started my training, was always underpinned by safeguarding and equality. That was always present, whatever assessments, whatever situation that I was involved in. So I was horrified to see some of what was going on and the dismantling of safeguarding, especially around children and vulnerable people. We all know that safeguarding is about trying to mitigate against the worst case scenario. And what didn't make sense to me was, why are they removing all of this? Self-ID is just, for me, self-ID is a predator's charter. It will open up a process that was designed for a small cohort of people to anybody and everybody, with no gatekeeping, no checks and balances. And that really, really frightens the life out of me, especially within the context of vulnerable women. And here in Scotland, we've got the crazy situation where any male, regardless of whether they have whether they're genuinely trans or they have dysphoria, can say that they are a woman if GRA reform goes through with self-ID, can say that they are a woman, and everybody has to accept that. And that opens up access to women's refuges. We see it where there are vulnerable women, or most vulnerable women in society are in prison, and the vast majority of them are in for non-violent crimes. And we see them being housed with males. And I read an article recently where in Scotland, around half, if not just over half of the transgender prison population have declared their transgenderism after conviction and demanded access to women's prisons. And we hear horrific stories all the time about, you know, vulnerable women being sexually harassed and raped within the prison women's estate. And it makes me very, very angry, but it deeply worries me that a lot of these women are living with trauma and they have no control over their environment. And I understand that punitive measures are in place if anybody objects. And for me, that's unforgivable, because clearly the Scottish Government have paid no regard to their needs. I can only imagine how horrific it must be to be trapped within an environment that you cannot escape from, with males that are causing you great distress. And some of these males may not be intentionally causing distress, but the reality is their mere presence is causing great distress for a lot of these women. And I don't know if I've had my 4 minutes or not, but I know that I could bang on about this all night, but I'll stop here and now and let other people speak.
Thank you very much, Caroline. There'll be plenty of opportunity for everybody, hopefully, to get a fair crack at the whip, so to speak, in the group conversation in a wee bit. Next, we move on, and it's going to be Maren Smith from For Women Scotland that's going to be speaking next. So, Maren, over to you.
Hi there, hi, and thanks for inviting us. I'm here today for Women Scotland, and I'll just very briefly tell you, I found the subject in 2017, initially over a free speech issue, because I am from East Germany, so growing up in a totalitarian country made me rather sensitive to the free speech violations that I was observing around about this issue. But it didn't take very long, and I was becoming very concerned about the implications of self-ID on safeguarding women and children, and on the rights of women and children in particular. So I don't just work with For Women Scotland. Mainly, I've been working on the school guidance for 4 years now, just to raise awareness of the failures of the guidance given to schools and what breaches of rights might occur if schools actually really do implement the guidance as written. And I'm also a member of a survivors group of survivors of male violence who are trying to raise awareness about our need for single-sex spaces, in particular for single-sex services in terms of rape crisis provisions. Now, what I'd like to particularly highlight today is the following really concerning issue when it comes to safeguarding. Now, my mother's professional responsibility was safeguarding children for decades. And she taught me, in what was a very uncomfortable conversation, that no one is ever exempt from safeguarding rules. And she pointed to me, she pointed to my father, a truly loving and caring man, and then she pointed to me. And she pointed out, you are not exempt from these rules either. More importantly, no child should ever be exempt from the safeguarding rules that we've put in place to protect them. And yet, when we're looking at the CAS review, when we're looking at the guidance given to schools, what we're doing at the moment is children who identify as trans seem to be taken out of the normal safeguarding rules that should apply. That should really, really concern us. I don't want to go into motivations or anything like that. I'm not even interested in that. I simply want to ask, why do these children not deserve the same safeguarding that everybody else deserves. So the Children's Scotland Act, 1995, is in essence, it's the law about safeguarding children in Scotland. It has a lot of information about parental rights and responsibilities. And I'll tell you right now, the one thing that is not in this law is that schools get to keep information secret from parents. The opposite is true. Information sharing mistakes are at the root of our most egregious failures in safeguarding children. Secret keeping from parents is the worst possible thing we can do. It results in alienating children from their parents, parents from the school that should support them, and the end result is never good for these children. I don't know if that's my 4 minutes, but
that's just about 4. Thank you very much, Maren. Now we'll move on to Lee from SOS Scotland. So Lee, over to you.
Hi, okay, I'm Lee. I'm part of Safeguarding Our Schools Scotland. We basically set up to be a resource for parents and teachers and children to help them challenge some of the things that are going on in Scottish schools at the moment. So we're just a group of ordinary mums, teachers, safeguarding professionals, and unfortunately, there's been quite a high demand for our services. Equality and inclusion are important so children feel valued and welcomed and safe in their school communities. But it's not equality and inclusion if all children are not treated equally and all children are not included. We're finding that equality and inclusion is taking priority over safety, privacy, dignity, and schools are misinterpreting or ignoring the law completely. Our main concerns are a bit what Maren was saying about the breakdown in relationships. So the breakdown in relationships between parents and schools and between children and parents. And often it can be a really difficult subject, and it's often inflamed due to schools' position on trans inclusion, which doesn't help with the documents that they've been given for guidance. Parents and children worry about being labelled transphobic. They're often not speaking about concerns, which obviously just increases the risk of harm. Equality and inclusion needs to be balanced. The rights of all children need to be balanced, and we always need to be mindful of safeguarding. We're currently supporting a group of parents and female pupils where a young male has been allowed to join the girls' sports team and access changing rooms. The girls are taking turns to cover each other while they're getting dressed to maintain dignity and privacy. And the parents, again, were not informed about any of this and only found out when there was an incident in the changing room and the girls went home in distress. So we've been helping the parents negotiate and challenge the school on this. Some people think, did the school take the easy way out? Was it easier just to go along with what the male pupil wanted? Or did they not stop to think about the impact that it was going to have on the girls? Either way, both are safeguarding failures. They could have looked at different ways to support everyone and uphold everybody's rights, but they chose not to. Another big concern for us is lobby groups being heavily involved in not only training teachers, but doing assemblies for children, resources and advice to schools about pronouns and social transitioning, the complete ignorance of the cash review in Scotland, which we are frequently told is not relevant in Scotland. I don't see how it's not relevant when children cross a border. You know, it doesn't change anything. The children are the same. They're going through the same issues. Keeping information about pupils secret. We had an email recently from a teacher concerned that anytime a child comes out as being trans identifying, then a communication is distributed to let all the teachers know not to share information with the parents. It's just a safeguarding nightmare. the biggest concern we have, well, there's lots, I could go on all night about all the concerns that we've got. Massive one is the supporting transgender pupils in Scottish school guidance, which was already a deeply flawed document, but it still has links to mermaids as a resource. We've been trying to challenge that, and it's just falling on deaf ears at the moment, but we're hoping to successfully, at least if it can't be rescinded, then we would like that removed. A massive concern for us is LGBT Youth Scotland. And again, I could go on all night about the practices that we have concerns over. Main one at the moment, and we've actually lodged an official complaint with Respect Me, which is the anti-bullying charity in Scotland. And they're very closely linked with LGBTYS. Yeah, so lots of concerns. There's lots happening in the background. Still lots of concerns. We do have a way to go.
Well, hopefully we can touch on some of those concerns as we get into the group discussion in a wee bit. Next speaker is James Esses. So James, over to you, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just very briefly about me, because I'd rather get stuck in and talk about the issues, but I became involved in this when I was counselling at Childline and I was undertaking a master's degree in psychotherapy, and I began to get concerned about the impacts of gender ideology on children, and I decided to speak out, and I launched a petition to the government on the topic, and for that I was expelled from my master's degree and kicked out of Childline. And I'm currently embroiled in some litigation in the Employment Tribunal, which is slow, but I'm looking forward to my day in court. But my concerns relate to children and safeguarding and gender ideology, so I thought I'd just talk for a few minutes about that. For me, the starting point is always this. Firstly, it's perfectly reasonable to believe that sex is binary and immutable, and also to believe that those who are struggling with their gender identity deserve support and mental health treatment and to be treated with respect. I don't believe that these things are mutually exclusive, even though many try to paint them out to be that way. Secondly, it's that gender dysphoria, this debilitating mismatch between one's sex and one's identity, is a mental health condition. And in the United Kingdom, in order to transition legally or medically, you must be diagnosed with it. And I believe that that is the frame of reference through which we should approach this entire subject. And yet gender dysphoria, to my knowledge, and I'm yet to be proven wrong on this, is the only mental health condition that is treated by affirming the distressing thoughts that somebody has inside their head or trying to physically modify somebody's body. And again, the oft used example is this for body dysmorphia or anorexia. The proposed treatment is not liposuction. And you know, research shows that the vast majority of children with gender dysphoria will settle into themselves if given time. And yet we've also seen from studies that if a child is started on puberty blockers, it is a slippery slope towards greater medicalization. And we're becoming, unfortunately, more and more aware of the impact that puberty blockers are having on brain development and bone growth. Cross-sex hormones too, as we know, can lead to infertility. And then, of course, we've got the surgeries, particularly the double mastectomies. And I'm constantly seeing euphemistic language being used, describing these as chest masculinization procedures or gender confirmation procedures. It's basically the glorification and commercialization of young people's bodies. And so it's unsurprising, therefore, that we see a growing number of detransitioners who have suffered irreversible harm mentally and physically for decisions that adults should never have allowed them to make. And I constantly hear from these detransitioners that they wish that the therapists had challenged them. But instead, unfortunately, the powers that be within the therapeutic community in this country are encouraging affirmation only. We've truly robbed children of the chance to experiment without facing irreversible regret. A few other concerns I've got, which I'm sure will open up in the group discussion. Education. I'm coming across more and more school materials sowing seeds of doubt into children's minds, suggesting to them that the doctor took a guess at their sex when they were born and might have made a mistake. What message are we sending to our children with that? We've got the cult-like behavior from groups like Mermaids, telling children that if you come out as trans, you can, quote, make the world a better place, I would argue is a form of indoctrination. And then we've got the language. We're seeing pronouns now containing, in online biographies and email signatures. I'm hearing at Childline that counsellors have started introducing themselves with their pronouns, which is particularly concerning. I'm concerned about Scotland. I mean, things are bad in England, but I think things are far worse in Scotland and Wales. So I'd like to open that up a bit, particularly around gender recognition reform. So it's a lot of doom and gloom. The tide is turning. We've seen some legal victories. We've seen positive media coverage, the Tavistock closure, and what's going on with mermaids. But the fact of the matter is that there's children out there that are still being transitioned. People are still being cancelled for speaking out. And so, unfortunately, I believe that our work is far from over.
Thank you very much, James. We will get into a lot of what you were talking about in the group discussion, and I look forward to it, actually. Next speaker, Richie Herron. Richie, thanks very much for joining us. Richie, we done an interview just to give people a wee bit of background, although I don't know why I would need to give you a wee bit of background. You're doing well on your own, as far as I see on every time I see on social media, etc. But we done an interview that we had to kind of hold back on because of court issues, shall we say. So hopefully my subscribers will get a chance to see that eventually, and the wider population will get a chance to see that interview, because it was very in detail. But you're the next speaker, Richie, so I'll leave it over to you to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. We must speak again. We'll have to do a new one because a lot has changed since that last interview. So I'm I'm trying to detransition, whatever the hell that means. I'm 35 years old. I started my transition medically at the age of 26. I was a vulnerable adult, and one of the reasons that I come here is a vulnerable child doesn't magically become a functional adult. They become a vulnerable adult too. And I feel like the language and the conversation that we'll have around safeguarding needs to be extended just beyond children to those vulnerable adults like myself and like so many others who get caught up in this. Because as I said, those issues don't go away. For me, I've been speaking out quite vocally since April, I would say, about how it is to try to even just detransition. Like, it's not straightforward. People think you can just take a new set of hormones, have a new set of surgeries, but this is for life. And I don't think kids especially, and vulnerable adults, not just young adults, but vulnerable adults, I don't think it's a fair thing to do to someone, to tell them that this treatment will save their life. And we're selling promises we just can't, and we can't keep. And the fact that this is happening to children too is far more disturbing, because if someone like me can fall into it, then children will very easily fall into it too. Especially when you tell somebody who's about to go through puberty that discomfort with your body means that you could be the wrong sex. How reckless is that? It's just so reckless, the whole thing. And my whole aim is, as well as trying to represent detransitioners and anyone who's been harmed by the medical aspect, but is to give a voice to as many people as possible, and to do this as quickly as possible and effectively as possible. And then I'll bow out for a nice retirement in a cottage somewhere. But that's me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Richie. Thanks for joining us. And thanks for being so honest with your chat. Thank you. Right, next speaker, we have Shelley speaking on behalf of Transgender Trend. So Shelley Charlesworth, over to you.
Okay, I am just going to take a slightly historical approach about Transgender Trend, actually. I'm sorry for those who know this, but for those who don't, I just want to say, set up in 2015. And it's interesting, I was just looking at the first blog posts in 2015, and the very first one, written by Stephanie Davis-O'Reilly, the founder, she wrote, "We have set up this website to provide an alternative source of evidence-based information which questions the theory, diagnosis and treatment of trans children. The mainstream media has been uniformly and uncritically accepting of the transgender diagnosis of children, and in the absence of public scrutiny, the number of children referred to gender clinics has risen exponentially. I mean, that was 2015, and that summed up the situation pretty succinctly then. In the next 6 months, Transgender Trend went on to critique the Westminster Trans Inquiry, which was basically a wish list of trans demands: self-ID, lowering the age at which you could get a gender recognition certificate to 16. This will ring some bells in Scotland. Widening the definition of trans, a shorter assessment time for puberty blockers and sex hormones, an end to single sex exemptions, and for gender identity to be taught in schools. Now I think we all know that some of those things were pushed back on in England and Wales, but not in Scotland. And some of them remain huge problems to this day. We also, within the first 6 months, critiqued the programme I Am Leo, which was one of the first and most pernicious forms of ideology for children on CBC, basically telling children you could change sex. And we wrote about breast binders. Again, here we are this month talking about breast binders. And also Stephanie raised the question of conversion therapy and the addition of gender identity to the MOU that rules most therapists, which says you must affirm a gender identity. She said this would be harmful to therapists, and again, as we know with the conversion therapy ban, bills that are going through in Scotland and may come back in England, this remains a problem. Anyway, Transgender Trend has remained quite consistent in linking all these issues, but they boil down to the healthcare pathways for children and what's happening in schools, and saying that there's a kind of unbreakable link between the two. Children wouldn't be presenting at clinics in the numbers they do if they weren't learning about it in schools and on social media. So to that end, in 2018, Transgender Trend brought out their first schools resources pack. It was widely condemned by activists as homophobic and a hate thing. Stonewall told everybody, teachers to bin it. But against the odds, we continued. We're in our 3rd edition now, and we've just updated it again with Sex Matters. So on that, we feel we've made some progress there. We've held the ground, and I'll go on to the guidance in a minute. But in terms of health, also we've made some progress. Kira Bell, very brave Kira, took her case to the High Court. And although ultimately she didn't win, I think nobody could deny that she totally changed the whole terms in which we talk about this, about what's happening to children. And then CAS, and the CAS review and the closure of GIDS, very, very important. We still have concerns over conversion therapy, which the activists still campaigning on here, and we still haven't got good guidance in schools. So I would really recommend everybody to look at the Braverman speech that she made in the summer, just a bit about schools, where she outlines the legal position. I think legally she's right, but we would like the new schools guidance that hopefully will come out quite soon before Christmas to recognise the legal framework, but also to put safeguarding at the very front of all of that. So that should be the starting point, that everything that is in the guidance for England will be, safeguarding will be the first concern. Parents should be involved, etc. I don't know how I am for time, but just briefly, I want to say for the future, what Richie said really resonated with me, because I think the age group 17 to 25-year-olds are the ones that really need our attention in terms of what goes on in gender clinics and in the general conversation about gender identity theory. And I think that an inquiry into adult gender clinics, both in NHS and privately, is absolutely long overdue, and that's what we'd like to see happen. I came into Transgender Trend at the beginning, sometime in 2018, and have been involved in writing mostly about school resources, the bad ones, you know, the really transy ones that tell children they're born in the wrong body. But now I'm quite concerned with all aspects of our work. So that's us. So I'll see you in the chat.
Thank you very much, Shelley. And finally, over to Farah, Farah Hamid. Farah, I would like you to give us your views on the sex/gender debate and what's alerted you to it, etc.
Well, my concern, I'm all for inclusion, but it's, and I'm all for supporting young people and young adults as well. But concern is with the government, Scotland, at ScotGov, excluding parents. And as James had said, Scotland's on a very, very slippery slope. I think we're slipping down, we're subsiding. It's about parental rights and responsibilities that parents have from the day your child is born. And one of the things is that in Scotland, up to the age of 16, you have the right to determine what type of education they have. You know, you're guiding, you're nurturing your child and their well-being up to the age of 18 as well. And if your child wishes for you to speak for them, you can. And then up to the age of 25, you have a financial obligation, you know, you're financially responsible for them as well in Scotland if they're being educated. You know, and that's how much parents' rights and responsibilities are in Scotland, that they have to nurture emotionally, physically, mentally. So why is Scottish government taking over all of this? You know, there are laws put in place that parents need to be aware of, right? Our children are going into school to be educated so that they can go out into the real world and survive in the real world, not to learn from a very young age. Now, for children who have body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia, they should have the relevant treatment. And I think the parents should be involved in that. And I can touch on that. Having personal experience growing up as a teenager, I can touch on that. Being an adult, you can still talk about that. But there are so many things that are going wrong in Scottish society that is broken down, and the parents need to be involved and parents need to know their rights. And I think we've got a good panel that can talk about that today.
Thanks very much, Farah. Right, well, let's get the group discussion started. So let me just change how the view looks, and I'll put on gallery, and I will remove myself. Hold on, I can't remove myself first. I need to add somebody first. Right. So as Kevin was the first person to speak and had the longest gap, so therefore, does any of the panel wish to have anything from what Kevin had said, or anything to start the group discussion? And I'll just add each person as you start speaking. So it's a free-for-all, so anybody can open this up.
Right, can I ask a question of Kevin then?
Of course.
Right, so because this is one of the things that I am really concerned about, and that talking to teachers is really incredibly concerning, and this is the secret keeping from parents, whereby we exclude parents from being able to act in the interests of their children. What legal basis did your school give you, or your college give you, in denying parents the opportunity to act in the best interests of the children. I mean, on what basis do they have this idea that we have to keep this absolutely secret from parents?
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. It's the whole thing to me was just breathtaking, and there was the kind of structural movement that was going, and it just sort of built up across the school. And as I said before, there was such a momentum that had built up around that. And that's kind of a long way of answering your question by saying, well, actually, they didn't have any legal evidence at all. They didn't have any legal arguments. Everything that they did just became another lie to support what they had done. And when I had my interview on GB News, I quoted Macbeth. I'll quote a different part of Macbeth. And a great line in Macbeth is, "What is bad begun makes itself strong by ill." And I think that's what I was seeing in terms of all the responses in the college. They would just lie and fabricate evidence to try and support a previous position that they had taken. Now, I pointed them repeatedly to the Children's Act, that my student was 17, therefore a child, therefore the Children's Act pertains. And they ignored that. I explained to them the Suella Braverman speech, and they ignored that. In the final dismissal letter, they ignored the Cass review, just like they're doing in Scotland. The dismissal letter ignored the Suella Braverman speech, extraordinarily so. And the only thing that they tried to say with any kind of legal position was that because the student was over 16, she could consent for medical treatment. Well, that's a complete misunderstanding of the laws of medical consent. The laws of medical consent apply to hospitals, not to schools. We are not, I'm a maths teacher, I'm not a doctor. It's not for me to try and determine if a student has been able to medically consent. So the only law that had been put forward by the school was an incorrect law, an incorrect application of a law. So in answer to your question, Maureen, there was nothing, zero. And I think that's been almost like one of the most extraordinary things to me. One of the things that really has sort of taken me back, listening to everybody in the panel, was my big concern, my personal concern, was that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. That maybe it's just New College Swindon, the place that I was at, that was particularly bad, and nowhere else can be as bad and stupid as that. But then what I find is that this is actually common, far more common and far more pervasive than everything I would imagine. And some of the things, I think it was yourself, Maureen, wasn't it? In fact, I think it was yourself. It was one of the other speakers talks about when a child transitions in the school, then an email comes around to say that no parents are to be told of the transitioning. And again, there'd be no law. At least certainly if it's in England, there's no law to try and support that kind of action. So really, what I see is that the schools are not even trying. Certainly, in my case, have not even tried to find any law to justify their position. They just work from one lie, one falsehood onto the next. And the state of the case that the college has built against me is shocking. And coming back to what James says, I look forward to testing this in court. And I think when it goes to court, I think everybody will be shocked by how little attention that the school has paid to the law, and even to any basic science.
We'll just stop that share there. Again, folks, just it's a free for all. So if anybody wants to add into what either Kevin said or add on to what Maren said, Kevin, sorry, were you? Yeah,
I just make one other point as well. Sorry to be going on here. The other thing that I learned as well, very much to my absolute shock and surprise, was it wasn't just the school that's not following the law and not following science and not following evidence. It was every other institution that's supposed to wrap itself around to try and ensure safeguarding. So, for example, after I got suspended, I referred my case to the DFE, to its whistleblowing services. And the DFE told me that it was a disciplinary issue. It wasn't a safeguarding. I said, no, this is safeguarding first, and then a disciplinary second. But they would not move. They would not act on the whistleblowing concern that I raised. By the help of Miriam Cates, we got it to the top of Ofsted. And Ofsted confirmed that they believe that child safety is at risk at New College, Swindon. But then they say that they have no powers to act. So it then goes to Swindon Borough Council. And Swindon Borough Council are able to raise prosecutions for safeguarding under the multi-agency safeguarding hub. But Swindon Borough Council have been funding and driving transgender doctrine into all the schools in the Swindon Borough area. So basically, you're asking the poacher to play the gamekeeper. I went to the police. The police wouldn't do anything. It's just every single avenue that you go down. You know, the unions were hopeless. You know, I'm in the NEU. And initially, the NEU were reluctantly representing me until they found a way of getting out of it, because the NEU are pushing the transgender doctrine so hard as well. So every place that a teacher can go to for help and support is shut down, and that it's that institutionalized failure that is absolutely catastrophic in this case.
Absolutely. Right, and do you want to comment on that, Lee? Maren, on you go, Maren. Sorry.
I'd like to add on to that because I know and have talked to quite a few teachers about this and some head teachers. Now in Scotland, the situation is that we have guidance from the government, which if you look deeply into it, once again, would breach the rights of children if you implement it as written. And the big problem we have with that is for Women Scotland send out freedom of information requests to all local councils to ask whether they got legal guidance. You know, just did you actually get legal advice looking into this guidance before you implement it? And the answer we got back was, in many cases, no, why would we? It's government guidance. Like, obviously, they've done the work that they need to. And so we asked the government, where does liability lie for implementing the guidance? And the government sent back a very brief, almost one sentence answer saying that legal responsibility for implementing this guidance, and obviously then dealing with all of the consequences, lies with individual teachers and head teachers. So they've washed their hands of their own guidance, but when you actually try and talk to schools, they don't really appreciate this fact. They are under the mistaken belief that they will be protected doing this. And so you've got teachers, well-meaning teachers, inadvertently breaching the rights of children, and they do not know about this. And we have quite a lot of concerns around that, both for the teachers themselves, for the profession, but also, of course, for the parents and children, because there's just absolutely no safeguarding understanding of safeguarding involved in any of this. And to be perfectly honest, all we're waiting for is a case to take to court. A group of parents, a group of children who are willing to challenge this in the courts, because we already know that a lot of the things that are going on, like for instance, the case earlier with the young male student who joined the sports team and is in the changing rooms, this breaches the rights of these girls. It's sex discrimination, it enables harassment of these. I mean, this is just a liability to the school, to the teachers, that if we challenge that in the courts just by looking at the law would obviously side with the children and their parents. And it's an impossible situation for many teachers. And as you found, if you're one of those teachers that then raises concerns, you will find yourself getting in trouble. And
Lee, sorry, I'm going to ask you, Lee, because obviously it was one of your students that Marin's referring to. It's the situations happening in a local authority to yourself. I spoke to you when you first set up. I had you on the podcast. I think it was the podcast. Oh, I'm forgetting. I'm not on camera. Actually, you can't see me, or maybe you can't see me. Can you? Right, the people, the public can't see me. Right, it's on broadcast. I don't know. Anyway, I spoke to you on the podcast when you were first launching, and you said that you've got really busy. But I've followed your Twitter feed for then, and I noticed the initiatives you are getting yourselves involved in. I noticed the posts that you're putting out, and obviously you said in your introduction that you are getting well used. I don't mean that. That doesn't sound right, but that's my typical scheme Scottish turn of phrase. But like you were getting the facility was getting attention, and you're thankful of that, I suppose.
Thankful that people have got somewhere to go, not thankful that it's needed in the first place. A lot, just going back to what we were saying about teachers, a lot of times when teachers raise concerns with us, they are just letting us know something. They don't want us to take it further because they need to remain anonymous. And it's so sad that, we could help a lot more people if they were just a wee bit more willing to share some details. Honestly, the amount of emails and DMs we get on Twitter just saying, I just need to let you know this, but I can't be identified. I can't let you know the name of the school. Sometimes they can't even tell us the name of the local authority. Sometimes they can, and we might, nudge a councillor or an MP or an MSP to try and get, kind of information in a roundabout way. But people are scared of speaking up. Parents are scared of speaking up. Teachers are scared of speaking up. And the sad thing is, parents have a lot of power. If they use their voice, they have more power probably than the teachers do. They're not going to get sacked. They're not going to get, a black mark against their name. Their parents are looking out for their own children. And it just makes us really sad sometimes that, we can't help everybody. But as I said, there's lots of things going on in the background. There's lots of challenges we've been putting in all over the place, and we'll keep going.
That's all we can do. James, I'm going to bring you in because just again off the back of what Lee was saying there, that teachers only going to get sacked, and that wasn't quite. There was obviously the early people that started standing up and started raising this were finding obstacles getting put in their way, and you were trying to take part in your master's degree, if I'm right, and it's a case of you notice these things, you raise these things, you went through the proper channels, and you still find yourself in the situation that you find yourself in now. And there are others who have, like Kevin, who've lost their jobs, who have been cancelled, is the term that gets used. And I mean, there was a very notable thing happened in Scotland just the other day, and I'll come to Caroline after James speaks here. There was a women's rights rally outside Holyrood, and I think J.K. Rowling posted a T-shirt, posted a picture of herself wearing a T-shirt saying Nicola Sturgeon, destroyer of women's rights. But in Scotland, it seems to be. I don't want to say this because Canada seems to have fallen, but it seems to be like on the path with Canada. And James, as I say, you've been highlighting these things and taking it through the proper channels just to be obstructed and then has your career hampered? How do we go over all the obstacles that are getting put in our way, because they're getting thrown at every junction?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I think the key point is that there's far too many people in society who are complicit in pushing these ideologies and in shutting down free speech. I mean, cancel culture does exist. I'm one of many victims of it. There will be more victims in the future. And, you know, it's particularly concerning given, if I look at my own case, you know, I started a government petition. You know, any resident or citizen of the United Kingdom is entitled to start a petition. It's a democratic means of having your voice heard. And I was studying at an educational institute in which free speech and open debate should be prized above all else. So it's particularly concerning that free speech is being hindered in that regard. But as I said before, I think too many people are complicit in this. And I often kind of think to myself, why do people go along with this ideology? From Scotland's perspective, for example, there is an element of it that I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I know that Scotland, and particularly Nicola Sturgeon, wants to kind of set herself out to be different to England. And so she can kind of launch this as their own initiative. Look at us, we're leading the charge, we're different from all of those kind of scumbags in England, you know, who are withholding trans rights. So I think there's an element of that. I think there's an element of people who genuinely believe they're trying to do the right thing. I think some parents have been caught up in this. You know, they think that if they don't go along with this ideology, that harm could come to their child might try and take their own life. That's the message that these parents are being fed. So some are doing it with good intentions. Some are just too afraid to speak out for fear of being cancelled. And the rest, I believe, have some sort of malintent. I genuinely believe that there are some who have evil motives with this. And I've spent some time reflecting on this, and I've come to the conclusion, controversially maybe, that I no longer care what somebody's reason or motive is for pushing this ideology, because the outcome is the exact same. It's an impact on children's welfare, on women's rights, and on free speech. So I don't care whether people have got good intentions or not anymore, because the consequences are exactly the same.
I'm pretty much of the same opinion as you on that. I have gone from the be kind to no holds barred situation. Kevin, yeah, please. Oh, you're on mute, Kevin.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, just finding the button there. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up, I think really on the last two comments on Maureen's comment first about the teacher liability. I think that's a really important point that I didn't talk about before. And the way things happened in New College Swindon was I was never formally told by the college management that I had to refer to a female as a male. There was nothing formally written down on the website to say that the college would not inform a parent that the child was transitioning. But the expectation is that I would. And effectively, the college management are trying to have the cake and eat it. They are trying to play along with this transgender game, but putting all the risk of legal liability on the teacher. So if I transition someone, if I socially transition, and then they go on and take cross-sex hormone treatment and and either commit suicide on those or get subsequently damaged, then I, as a teacher, can be liable for encouraging that pathway. Alternatively, if I don't, I get fired. So the schools have certainly in my experience have played this in an atrocious way of just loading all the liability for whatever happens on a teacher. And the college kept referring back to its gender reassignment policy that I should have been following. Well, if you read the gender reassignment policy that the college had, it was absolute rubbish. It was more for adults rather than for children. And the only thing about the pronoun that you were supposed to use was buried away in Appendix 3 and with various caveats that there should be a transition plan, which there never was. So they hadn't even followed their own procedures, but their expectation was that everybody would comply and say that a girl is a boy or a boy is a girl and comply with the student's wishes. So it's a completely bizarre situation. The other thing I think was really interesting what James has just said, that because I hadn't been fully aware of the detail of James's case. But James did everything right. You went through all the normal formal procedures and processes that are supposed to be there to uphold free speech and safety and societal development and so forth. I did the same. I raised 2 safeguarding concerns. It's not my job then to worry about them. That's a neutral act on my behalf. And James and I end up in the same position of detriment for actually following the processes as they are supposed to be followed.
Yeah. Farah, I'm going to ask you to come in. You've got your hand up there.
Well, I've come across parents, James and Kevin, professionals. I used to be a teacher myself. I used to teach biology, so I'm well aware of the curriculum. And also teenagers seem to know more than the adults as well and what's going on nowadays. But when it comes to parents were threatened by schools and also social workers appearing at their door. Parents were told that if they had contacted the school, the education authorities, that we don't want our kids being taught this. And obviously it's got nothing to do with the curriculum, that, we want to be the ones teaching our children, this stuff. It was a case of, well, is it because of your religion? Is it because of your colour? It all boiled down to race and ethnicity. So, and there was a couple of instances where children that I know of personally that, and I've been asked to help, that social workers turned up at the door as well.
It's again, all of these things that are happening, Farah, they're happening, and people are getting caught out by it because it's happening on an individual basis. So we're trying to bring this to the attention of the, again, it's not getting made mainstream, so we're trying to make it as mainstream as we can so that more people know about it and know how
people
to
are scared
act
to speak
in
up.
eventuality. Exactly.
They're scared to speak up because they think they're the only ones that are going through it. Somebody's come to my door, and it was actually a podcast I'd seen of somebody, and it's happened to me for something else. And this lady on the podcast said, do not open the door to the social worker. Do not engage with them. Do not talk to them. Tell them. And I've studied law. I know. Yet when it came to social workers, and I was like, oh my God, But, and I've had dealings with social workers as well. And it took me 2 years of trying to get rid of them for an accusation they made to me. And that was what I had to go through. But I'm now currently in the process of dealing with other people, helping other parents. And people don't know what to do, especially with the gender ideology, starting at the age of 3 in nursery schools in Scotland, in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure it's around cities around Scotland as well.
It's happening not just in Scotland, Farah, it's happening everywhere. And this is what we're trying to bring attention to it. So, Maren, I'm going to, you've got your hand up for you, I'll ask you to speak. Go ahead.
Oh,
sorry, Shelley, sorry.
It's okay.
I've planted that seed in my own head now, and it's no shifting. My apologies, Shelley.
It's okay. Okay, it says it on the screen, but
every time I move my mouse, it appears, but I've already spoken by that point and committed to the wrong name. My apologies.
I was just going to say, anecdotally, we know that there's, from talking to people who are involved in this same area, at Transgender Trend, we know there's been a huge increase in parents reporting come back to school after the summer, and there are more girls usually identifying as trans, and it's anecdotally again, and that's all it is. It's not the sort of girl who might have been expected to do that in the past. It's the ones who have had no sign of any kind of gender non-conforming, they're not neurodivergent, and they're not necessarily same-sex attracted, but, and you know, little clusters in the same classes. So that is, it's anecdotal. But what we do know also is those referred to the Tavistock have gone up. The numbers referred to the Tavistock are now 5,000 the last year. Before, the previous year's figures were 3,500. So it's a huge, huge increase. And so this problem seems to be in schools and in the culture generally is not going away. It seems to be, even as everybody gets more aware and there are more people speaking out about it, that the problem at the grassroots is getting worse. But I know I mentioned earlier the guidance, and I think you, Peter, you put up a screenshot of the Times article today about what could be in it, what might, you know, we don't know what's going to be in it, but that guidance will only be guidance. It won't be statutory. That will be the problem as well. And it will be, yes, that one. So it'll be something that parents can use. It's something hopefully that teachers and schools can use. But unless it's, I think some aspects of it will be backed up by law, because if it references the Equality Act and gender reassignment and sex in the Equality Act, it ought to be quite strong. But that's where we possibly are going to need test cases. And I think it was Leah and Maren both said, reference problems of getting parents, understandably, to come forward, and how hard that is. Parents who have a child who has gender issues, and I know this because they write to us at Transgender Trend, the last thing they want to do is actually to make a situation worse. They feel they would make the situation worse by tackling the school about it. So you have that problem. And there are parents who are willing to do something because they can see the problem and they don't want their child possibly to be influenced by this ideology, or they just object generally to the teaching of gender identity. But even then, it's quite hard for parents to oppose it. So I don't know who said it, but I think, you know, at some bigger forum we need where parents can come out and speak out about this, and add a bit of weight and numbers, so that Ofsted, the Department for Education here in Westminster rather, and in Scotland as well, that they are all they will not be allowed to say, we don't know about this, we don't hear this, which is what the Ofsted does at the moment. They claim, oh, we don't hear about these complaints from parents, when we know parents have complained to Ofsted. It is, there are a huge number of big battles to come. The guidance will hopefully just be one small bit of armory for us, but I don't think it's going to be the answer. But, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Shelley. Caroline, I'm going to ask you, you've got your hand up, I'm going to ask you to speak, and then Maren, and then once both of you have spoken, what we'll do is I'm going to share an article. It was a complaint that was made to the Charity Commission in regards to mermaids, and this complaint was made 2 years ago. Just soon as we're talking about parents, this is a parent of somebody who was going through gender dysphoria, and they made a complaint 2 years ago. They've given me permission to share it anonymously, so we will, and we'll get your thoughts on it. We'll have a read through it and get your thoughts on it. But Caroline, if you would like to say your piece first of all.
Sure, yeah, it's just gone back to the Scottish guidance, and I feel very strongly that the Scottish Government have pulled a fast one, because it's non-statutory guidance, but schools are under the impression that this is the guidance, this is from experts, we need to implement it. And I was a councillor until May this year, and I took a motion early in the year to council, and the motion was pretty straightforward, and it was asking basically to look at the guidance, but also to use Sex Matters and Transgender Trend guidance as well. And the response to that, especially one of the councillors had gone online, and because the banner had said no child is born in the wrong body, his default position was that these are a hate group, and he just wouldn't move on from that. But what really gobsmacked me, and it's my own naivety for overestimating my councillor colleagues, I really wanted to get some proper research and facts into the chamber so that people might stop and think. And so I was quoting Dr. David Bell of what happened to him, Sonia Appleby, Dr. Will Malone, and a couple of others, and just giving a little flavour of some of the things that they said. And the Deputy Provost stopped me mid-speech and said, you're giving too much information, you're confusing us. So I would like you to stop there. And I was gobsmacked. I've since heard that when you submit a motion, it goes up online 2 weeks before the date of the council meeting. And of course, the activists, they'd been keeping a close eye on me because I was once an SNP councillor. And had been keeping a close eye on me, and they saw my motion. And so they attacked me online, but then they went to the council, I numerous emails about what a transphobe and a Nazi bigot, etc. that I was. And they obviously went to councillors as well, to the point that one councillor more or less called me a Nazi in the chamber for bringing this forward. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, don't overestimate your councillors. Most of them don't have a clue. They really don't know what they're voting on. They don't know what they're implementing. And I have great sympathy for a lot of teachers, because the teachers, the vast majority that I've spoken to, don't have a clue that they will be held liable should future cases come before a court.
And following Scottish politics as closely as I do, just to back up what Caroline's saying about the councillors after the last local election intake, I have taken agree wholeheartedly with what Caroline's just said there. Sorry, Maren, you've got your hand up, so on you go.
All right, so I just want to come back to a few things said before me. So I want to go back to, first of all, what Richie said, that we are forgetting about vulnerable adults in this. And the age group in particular that is probably overrepresented amongst those who are identifying as trans are those young adults who are trying to find an identity or trying to find something to help them, both at colleges and university. And there is an understanding in Scotland, as evidenced by the Scottish government acknowledging that our young adults do not properly mature until then in their mid-20s. Consequently, we've had new guidelines for sentencing. But there is no joined up thinking here that those same maturity processes might also play a role in, let's just say, maladaptive coping mechanisms, as in I have really serious issues, and now it's been suggested to me that those issues might all be caused by my identity not being recognized. And that's one of the things that is a real concern, and it's one of the groups, Richie points that out quite rightly, it is actually one of the groups that's falling by the wayside right now because we're not really focusing on them. I just quickly want to come back to Farah saying, that parents who raise objections are then challenged, saying, are you doing this because of your religion or your race? And the answer to that should be a very proud yes, if that's the case, because you have rights to your freedom of religion, to your freedom of belief, and the belief that you can change sex is protected, but so is the belief that you cannot change sex. And so there is absolutely nothing in the law that says one supersedes the other, and you cannot challenge that. Now, we have a problem in schools We've had a video in Scotland from Queen Anne High School in Dunfermline proudly declaring that they've changed all of their toilets to mixed sex toilets. And my question in response to that, so For Women Scotland sent a letter to the head teacher saying, well, what provisions have you actually made for those children from religious communities, from ethnic communities who need single-sex provisions in changing rooms and in toilets? We haven't had an answer to that yet, so we expect the answer is going to be either a fudge or completely ignoring our requests. But this idea that inclusion now leaves by the wayside those communities we've tried very hard to include in public life in Scotland is a worry. And coming back to what Shelley said, that girls are now representing at, the clinics being referred with dysphoria, who are not actually neurodiverse and who are not gay. Well, one of the main reasons why girls seek to identify out of growing up to be women is sexual abuse. We know that sexual harassment, assaults are endemic in our schools. There are various statistics which range from between 1 and 3, but between a third of all girls aged 16 to 18 having experienced some form of unwanted touching at school, and 2/3 of girls having experienced sexual assault or harassment outside of schools. And there is an obligation on states under Article 39 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which says that recovery and reintegration shall take place in an environment that fosters the health, welfare, self-respect, dignity, and autonomy of the person and takes into account their gender, by which they here mean sex, and age-specific needs. So victims of abuse, for instance, the committee noted the importance of respect for the child victim's right to privacy, in particular in cases involving abuse. And that's not happening in our schools. And if you read the guidance closely, if there is a girl who has been subject to sexual violence, she would have to disclose that in order to be allowed a safe single-sex toilet or changing room, for instance, which goes counter the law that protects victims of crimes. And there is a reason for that, because disclosure always brings harm to the victim, and many child victims of abuse don't understand that they have a right to boundaries, that they have a right to assert these boundaries, which is where safeguarding should step in. So that's just one of the things that we are really concerned about, that children who have experienced abuse and who therefore feel incredibly uncomfortable, anxious, and many even scared if they have to share toilets or changing rooms with the opposite sex, are being completely forgotten in this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Marion, with what you said. Just to clarify, I was saying that this sort of, that was part of the anecdotal section of it. I suspect it's the types of girls who've always presented at clinics. I don't think they've changed, but we've no reason to think so. But anecdotally, talking to other people about this recently, since the new term started, it is that it is not the more obvious types of groups. It does seem to be even more of a following of a trend than it was before. That's what I was meaning by the group, this type of girl who isn't neurodivergent or obviously neurodivergent or same-sex attracted, whether or not I agree, all the problems of having had some form of sexual abuse, that it would be a huge problem. I wouldn't like to speculate on that. I'm just repeating what I was told anecdotally about schools. Yeah.
Right, on that, and we'll have a wee chance for you guys to have a wee breather, a wee drink, and I'll do a wee bit of or attempt to do a bit of reading. This is where I lose my credibility here. It shows my reading skills. So I'm glad I've got a teacher and we've got some other support assistants on hand. I jest a wee bit, but no, my reading skills aren't that great. I'm just first going to put myself on camera because I've just realised, oh no, I'm on camera. Right, okay, that's fine. I'm on. That's fine. It's just I don't see myself. Right, okay. Right, as I say, this was a complaint that was sent in to the Charity Commission about mermaids, and it was from the parent of a gender distressed child. It will be anonymous, other than the information that's here. There's no names, so I'm going to read through this. I am a mother of a gender distressed child. One of her teachers at school recommended I go to Mermaids to learn how to best support my daughter. I had several quite alarming discussions over the Mermaids chat line, where they had no interest in my daughter's complicated long-term mental health struggles, but instead said I should affirm her as a boy. Mermaids have an online forum, youth forum for ages 12 to 19. Unlike the parents forum, where you must provide proof of ID to join, there are no checks for the youth forum whatsoever. In reality, anyone of any age can join. The only check they make is a brief phone call where you describe where you are on your gender journey. No proof of ID or age is requested at any point. Mermaids stress that the email you use must not be accessible to parents, and you are told to make a separate email address if yours is shared. Let's just scroll down. Thank you for contacting Mermaids. We have safely received your request to join our youth forum to complete the application process. We will need the following from you: full name, address, home, including postcode. Please know that your details stay confidential with us, and we will not contact you unless we have any serious safeguarding concern and can get hold of you via email or phone. A phone call, dates and times. I'm going to skip through so people can get the gist of it, the idea of all of the information that you're required to provide as a parent. However, you can just be a gender distressed child or vulnerable adult and just have access to all of these services, or obstacles as it would be for a parent. I'm going to continue on with reading here. Once in the forum, any member can email you directly, and again, given the lack of ID checks, this could be anyone contacting members as young as 12. This is not made clear to parents where they are aware their child has joined what is supposed to be a safe, moderated forum. The forum itself is pretty much a free-for-all, and I think it fails the most basic safeguarding standards as a parent. I am horrified by what young adolescents are exposed to behind their parents' backs. For example, moderators frequently offer to send young girls free binders. Binders are associated with a variety of physical risks: breathing difficulties, bruised, crushed ribs, damaged breast tissue, etc. In this example, a 13-year-old girl says her mother won't let her have a binder because the physical health risks, and a moderator offers to send her one behind her mother's back. So this is the screen grab from that example. And it just confirms what the parent was raising. So it's point 2, self-medicating is discussed in the forum with the moderators really pointing out the dangers of buying cross-sex hormones online without a GP prescription and having your bloods done. Generally, it is left to other adolescents to point out the dangers to the poster, and again, there will be very young adolescents reading these types of posts. In this example, a moderator offers a private discussion, but does not highlight the dangers of self-medicating. It is left to another adolescent to do so. So, as you'll see here, it's reading all this information. Point 3. There are frequent recommendations and endorsements for Gender GP. Gender GP is run by Helen and Mike Weberly. Both doctors are currently suspended by the GMC and are unable to practice in the UK. Instead, they have moved to Spain and opened a practice there, offering an online service to patients. It gives you the link. Again, this was 2 years ago this complaint was raised. Some of the details in it may have changed from then. However, it was valid at the time. When the National Lottery investigated mermaids in 2018-19, they recommended that mermaids consider the implications of linking to Gender GP on their website. And again, it gives you the link there to that. At this point, the Weberleys were under investigation. Mermaids did remove the link on their website. But within the youth forum, there are frequent endorsements for Gender GP, and specifically the Weberleys mermaids moderators do not comment on these posts or point out that the Weberleys have been suspended from the GMC and are not allowed to practice in the UK. E.g., here are recent posts from someone who used Dr. Weberley in the UK before the suspension. Excuse me. And point 4, reference to suicide. There are regular posts from distressed adolescents who say they are feeling suicidal. Whether or not a moderator picks up on these posts is hit or miss. Sometimes a moderator will offer a private chat and will give the number for Samaritans, but other times it is left to the adolescents in the forum to post supportive messages, e.g. here. Excuse me, folks. So again, it's an example of screen grabs from that forum. Point 5, encouraging lying to GP. In this conversation, a poster says that they're going to tell their GP that they are considering self-medicating. Another poster encourages them to lie to the GP and tell them that they actually are self-medicating and discusses how to do so and not get caught out. At no point does the moderator post to condemn this suggestion. And again, adolescents as young as 12 are reading these conversations, and where their parents are aware they are members of the youth forum, the parents have been told it is safe and moderated environment. And again, it's a screen grab of the description that was given by the concerned parent. These are not isolated incidents, but are a sample to give you an idea of the lack of safeguarding in the Mermaids Youth Forum. I believe the forum puts its adolescent users, particularly the younger ones, at risk of serious harm through a lack of proper moderation and or understanding of serious issues such as self-medicating and suicidality. This organisation is frequently recommended by schools and has a high-profile online presence with endorsements from multiple celebrities. It receives National Lottery funding and has in the past received funding from children in need. However, behind the scenes, the support offered in the youth forum demonstrates a disregard for safeguarding and puts its vulnerable users at risk. I would ask the Charities Commission to carry out a thorough investigation of Mermaids and its youth forum. As I say, that was a complaint from a concerned parent to the Charities Commission. Richie, I'm going to come to you if you don't mind. First of all, on this. Because you had said young adults, vulnerable adults, as well as we had said about children. And I know that from interviewing you that we can't put it because of court reasons, that was something that was common in our conversation, was the fact that you had been introduced to things at a young age. You already had
yeah, I mean, I'll come in on that. So I had quite a few unfortunate, what I would call a series of unfortunate experiences when I was very young online. You know, the internet was a new thing in the 90s. My parents thought I was kind of safe indoors, sort of thing. And because I couldn't really explore my sexuality like out in the world, I tried to explore it online as I got to a teenager, and I found myself in the company of older men. But I thought that was like a liberating thing rather than what it was, which was actually an imbalance of power. And it seems to me that not everyone, but a lot of people who go into the trans stuff have given themselves to mainly older males online in this form or another. The younger males who are detransitioned in the mid-20s, they did something very similar with the likes of 4chan, where they would where they would share lots of naked photos of them before they were underage, and by the time they got to this sort of transition period, they're pretty much in the sort of the mindset to have trust betrayed again as an adult. They kind of get re-victimized, and that's kind of what I kind of theorize essentially happened to me in a way, because when I went to the trans forums at the age of 25, again, I was an adult, but I was in that drop-off age group, you know, where it's just like, they're over 18, who cares, right? And when I got there, it was just all, again, loads of much older men telling us how beautiful I was, how much I would pass, how I needed transition now, otherwise I'll end up looking like them in 30 years. And then it escalates when you start sharing photos, especially because obviously it is all very narcissistically driven and you're sharing pictures of yourself. And there's this sort of encouragement from them to transition, especially somebody who looks young, whether it's to feminize them or masculinize them. And it's almost as if like their own, how should I say, their own desires are kind of influencing what is actually right for people, as it were. So they see young males and obviously females, but I'm coming from the angle that I know. And the unspoken truth is that there's a lot of online abuse from older males to younger males. It's rampant. Just think about how many males use computers, like young males, and you think about how the internet is structured and how it's bad. And the reason that I've went into that is because there is a link. I don't know exactly what. Again, I'm somebody who's been through, and I've heard so many detransition stories that have got the same themes over and over again. Some sort of online grooming, where either when they were young or in their own transition stage itself. But yeah, I think the two are intertwined deeply, and it's a conversation that we need to move on to the next bit, because what a lot of people don't want to talk about with the trans rights movement is it's highly sexualized. The whole thing is sex. Like, for something that's not about sex, they're obsessed with, well, what they would call sexual autonomy and liberty, but I see it as a denigration of boundaries for women and children specifically. And yeah, young people are getting absolutely left to the wolves, because again, it's that age group that kind of just gets forgotten about, which is why if you get it right for children, you can get it right for young adults too, I think. But yeah, hopefully that answered that, Peter.
Aye, again, it's a case of trying to cover all the bases and talk about all the areas, because it's wide reaching. It's a multifaceted attack, and the way I would describe it is we're at war for our very existence as the society we know, and it's hard to kind of know which area requires the attention first. So we've got to address this as an overall issue. And for me, it starts at the very beginning. It says everything about society and how they teach or they deal. No, they teach. They deal with their weakest and their youngest in society. They're most vulnerable. So, it starts with everybody should be safeguarding. Safeguarding should be everybody's priority, and a lot of people, I think everybody said that in a version of that. So I'm no any different as a parent. I sit here concerned and go, where do I turn? Because I've got a school age child at that influencing age, and I go, what's my avenue? Because I've the Neanderthal approach, because if somebody was saying those things to my kids out with school, then that's the police get involved in that. But I come from an area where you don't really go to the police. The police is only an option, right? And it's a case of, right, well, how do I best deal with this so that I'm no Neanderthal approach? How do I progress myself? And then I go, well, what do I need to progress? I know what a man is. I know what a woman is. I know what reality is, and I know what safeguarding is. So why do I need to then change for 0.02% of the population's mental health issue? And I'll always refer to it as a mental health issue. It's not it's a sexual issue. I've probably said enough. Right, we've got a couple of hands up, so I'm going to come in the order that they're up. So Maren, first of all, then Farah, and Kevin, I see you're putting your finger up, so we'll come to you thereafter. So Maren, first of all, please.
Well, I just want to really confirm what Richie was saying about these forums and about the safeguarding concerns online. This applies to Scotland as well. So a lot of Scottish schools signpost LGBT Youth Scotland. And LGBT Youth Scotland have a forum quite similar to Mermaids, which caters to 13 to 25-year-olds. First of all, it's again, this shouldn't really be one age group because of the massive differences in maturity levels. And a lot of that can be live chat with an adult that parents don't know about. So that's a real concern. And I would really recommend parents looking closely into how their children engage. And if you are concerned as a parent, just to come back to you, one thing you can check for is whether the school that your child goes to is going for or has what's called the LGBT Youth Charter Award. And if they do have these, they have to meet certain conditions. And one of these conditions is that they actually do teach the children in school that they can change sex. And that would be one way in which you can actually figure out whether or not that kind of thing is going on at your child's school. And the places you can go to, obviously, we've got someone from an organisation directly sort of focusing on schools, safeguarding schools here with Lee, and for Women Scotland also get a lot of inquiries, and we can then, for instance, we got legal advice on the fact that schools have to have single-sex toilets that parents can then share with their schools. So there's a lot of information that you can get, but it is always difficult as a parent to raise your concerns.
Thank you, Maren. Farah, come to you.
Thanks, Richie. I just wanted to say thank you. That was really, really brave of you. One of the things I wanted to, what Caroline had pointed out, was about the self-ID thing, and the education curriculum now is what they have 3 to 18, but it doesn't stop there. We've got, is it Harriet, what university had said that men can give birth, and it was that's it, so I'm right. So it doesn't stop there. We had a few nurses that had alerted someone, so that came to light. So even adults in higher education are scared to speak out in case they get chucked out their course, or so these were midwives, would-be midwives that are being trained, and they're being taught that men can give birth, which is, as a former biology teacher, I would not be teaching a male child or a female child these lies. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is that what would the Scottish government do if all the parents came out on the street? I mean, this would cause a riot. There's nothing they could do about it if all the parents got together and did something about it.
Maybe that's what they're hoping for, but we'd much rather
that's
be
my
peaceful
line on this.
Kevin, I'll come to you. You had your hand up, and then we'll come to Caroline thereafter.
Yeah, thanks. It was just a quick one. I just wanted to thank Richie. That was just one of the most eloquent and powerful testimonies that I think I've ever heard anyone saying. I hope that gets into every single school from Cornwall up to John O'Groats. I think that was just amazingly powerful, Richie. Thank you for the courage and explaining what you've been through there. At the back of my mind, Richie, when you were talking through that, was the Jimmy Savile scandal, and how he played his perversion in plain sight. He hid himself in plain sight, which I think is what this trans movement is doing as well. But to me, it's there are obviously parallels, but the scale of what is happening here just totally dwarfs Jimmy Savile. Just absolutely dwarfs. It makes him look like just a Sunday school tea party by comparison. And I think we need to look at those same kind of dynamics, but imagine those on a much bigger scale. And as I say, I think Richie's just done an amazing job of explaining and just helping close that awful circle. Yeah, I saw that earlier on.
I'm just doing a wee screen share here while you're chatting, Kevin. So carry on. This is
no, I'm about done there. I can't add anything more on there from what Richie had said. But yeah, I saw this guy. This is just atrocious.
I just wanted to quickly jump in and just say thanks, Kevin, Farah, for your kind words. It's very kind of you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to add to that and say the interview that Richie and I done is an absolute cracker. And when people get to see it, and I can't wait for people to get to see it, but obviously, from the legal perspective, once Richie's through everything that he's going to go through, it'll be something for everybody to see. Yeah. Because it does go into great detail. And Richie knows, I've said to Richie before that, listen, this is so brave of you to speak out in the way that you're speaking out, because it's not only you're going through that battle yourself, you're trying to comfort other people that's going through it by doing it openly. You're trying to make other people aware of the dangers. So you're doing a fair bit of lifting there. As all of the panel here, Rich is just doing that wee bit extra because he's got the physical battle to deal with as well. So to everybody that's on, great. I can't speak high enough for you all. So anyway, I'll shut up now. Sorry, Caroline, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I just there's a couple of points I want to make. Farah talked about the Heriot-Watt University and what they were teaching student midwives. What they were also teaching student midwives was to catheterize a penis for childbirth. It's just absolutely ludicrous. But I also want to thank Richie, because I think that we're learning so much more from people that have gone through the process, because there's not a lot of research out there. Certainly from the last 20 years, it's become, because it's a current topic and has been for a while. I think there's more information available. But just briefly touching on what Richie was saying around the highly sexualized environment, we see that playing out in schools and libraries where drag queens are brought in to read to children, and we're told this is all about inclusion. We never see lesbians being brought in to read to children. It's all these parodies, highly sexualized parodies of women. And I know that they don't necessarily dress that way when they're with the kids, but so many of these drag queens, especially all the ones that have made the headlines, they're in the adult sex industry. And indeed, there are drag queens themselves that are saying, this is not for children. This is adult entertainment. And I just want to finish with LGBTY Scotland. It just blows my mind. We have a huge historical child abuse investigation going on in Scotland, the biggest ever. And LGBTY Scotland had a horrific child abuse ring operating within it. And what I can't get my head around is these guys were prosecuted, and then LGBTY Scotland just kept going. Why was there not an independent investigation into this? And I just cannot understand why that was all sort of swept over. And I think part of the problem, I think a big part of the problem is that our legislators are abdicating their responsibility, and they're passing it on to lobbyists and activists who, if not directly writing government policy, they are strongly influencing government policy. And I think that is so obvious in Scotland. And that's why the cash review is ignored. That's why professional experts are ignored, and lobby groups and activists are quoted as being the people in the know. It's all about lived experience. And yet that's the only area it's about lived experience. What other area of medicine can a child or young person rock up and demand specific treatments? There aren't any that I can think of.
Absolutely. Just to touch on the child abuse inquiry, the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry, Caroline, I'm in talks with Advocate John Hawley to try and get him on to do a bit of open and honest discussion about the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. It was in Selkirk on the 3rd of May 2019. So there's some findings for that are allegedly being denied or being hushed up. So we're going to talk a wee bit about that. But that's another thing that just we're talking about it. I would like to share a video clip. Now this was a video clip that was shot in a broom cupboard. And I've done a wee bit of Tweet Street editing, so I have added other things to it for, well, it was because I was bored from my own entertainment, and there's a bit of a message there, so I'm going to share that with everybody that's here and also the viewers.
Much time for anything other than the fight against COVID right now, but on some days, silence is not an option. This message wasn't planned, it's not scripted, I haven't consulted with armies of advisors. That might be obvious, but what you're about to hear comes from my heart. Over the course of the day, I've heard reports of mainly young people in significant numbers leaving the SNP. I know many of you personally. I consider you friends. I've campaigned alongside you. You're a credit to our party and our country. It grieves me deeply that you've reached this conclusion after much soul searching, because you consider at this stage the SNP not to be a safe, tolerant or welcoming place for trans people. That's not acceptable to me. As SNP leader, I will do everything I can to change that impression and persuade all of you that the SNP is your party and that you should come home where you belong. Yes, we have differences of opinion on gender recognition reform. We should debate them openly and respectfully, but no debate can be a cover for transphobia. Trans people have as much right as any of us to be safe, secure and valued for who they are. Transphobia is wrong and we must treat it with the zero tolerance we treat racism or homophobia. Those are the principles I want to characterise the SNP and the country that I am privileged to lead. They're also the principles and values that I want to underpin the independent Scotland I've spent my whole life campaigning for. I don't support that as an end in itself, but as a means to a better, fairer, more just Scotland. Now, some will criticise this message, say it doesn't go far enough, or that the words are hollow unless we prove we mean them. I'm determined we will. No doubt others will accuse me of being woke. I don't care. Sometimes, particularly as a leader, it's vital to speak up for what is right and against injustice. That is why I'm posting this message, and I'm grateful to you for listening.
We go unnoticed, right up until the moment they scream for mercy. Am I a threat to you? Do I send chills down your spine? Picture this. I hold a knife to your throat and spit my transness into your ear. Does that turn you on? Are you scared? I sure fucking hope so.
Right, so we'll stop that share there. Again, that was the First Minister of Scotland from a broom cupboard, and somebody who was championed from LSE for that piece that they put. And when you put the two of them together, it kind of there's some doesn't match up. I don't know if what the First Minister's saying to what that person's saying. That was why I put the two of them together. It's just and again, if you think about it for too long, it will hurt your head. Right. So, it's a wee bit of satire on my part. I wanted to, I guess, ask: is there anything that you would like me to highlight? Because I've got, we're talking about child abuse, and we're talking about dangers in safeguarding, and how it's brave that, because a lot of the comments that are coming in, just, I don't know if any of the guests that are watching the online chat, I don't know if you're tuned into it, but I'm just trying to. A lot of people are saying thanks very much for being open and speaking, because it is difficult for some people find it more difficult than others, for one reason or another, to speak up and put their face on camera. So with that in mind, I would like to share another video of so a clip that was shared on YouTube. Farah, you're aware of this, so I'll get you to comment on it first after we've showed it, and then we'll ask the rest of the guests what they think of it. So here we go. I need to remember to share the screen first.
And what we're doing within children's social services, they are recruiting whole gangs of child traffickers into social services. A lot of them come from Africa and India, and so we have been trying to raise awareness. Hello, Billy. Hello, Lucy. I know some of the people here. That makes me feel a bit better, because a lot of you won't know who I am because you don't see my posts. It's quite astounding, the scale of it, and Angie has been doing a lot of research too. There is on the government webpage, there's a thing called assets, and under assets on a government webpage you can put in adoption and fostering agencies, and that you can print out the whole list. There's hundreds, literally hundreds and hundreds of these private fostering agencies, and they are just a facade. They are not real fostering agencies. They are being run by people with links to things like logistics, meat factories, taxi firms, adrenochrome bioscience labs, which is adrenochrome and stem cell harvesting. It's just staggering. The amount of child trafficking that is going on through social services is absolutely staggering. And one of the first social workers we investigated was one from up here in Cumbria, and he was trafficking children to the Middle East. So they're not just taking them and selling them here, they're selling them abroad as well. And that was a research hospital called Sidra Research Hospital, and that was actually built by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that hospital, and they're researching genomics on our children. So this has been, we've been investigating this for 2 years, and we took them to the police when we had solid evidence, and of course they didn't do anything about it. MPs know what's going on and they're not doing anything about it. It's just hidden. This subject is completely hidden, and it's forced adoption and risk to future emotional harm.
Right, so we'll stop that there. Farah, you watched this full video. What was your take on it?
I was kind of shocked, so I looked into some of the things that she'd said, and I'd have to agree with them, but I already knew some of this stuff was happening. But then some people might call me a conspiracy theorist because I don't have any physical proof of it myself. But so all I have is what I can go by on, what I've experienced myself, what the social services try to pin on me, what they've tried to pin on other families that have asked me for help, what this lady's talking about, what I already know in my previous experience work I've done. So I think a lot of that is going on, and I've looked into some of the names that she said in the genomics. So I do believe that all this kind of stuff is going on. This lady, she's there's a bit of there's another angle going on. She doesn't use her real name because she herself is persecuted because of her family members, but she puts a lot of stuff out on social workers, counsellors, and other stuff that goes on in where she stays, which is in England. But I think people need to wake up and smell the roses and speak up about what goes on around. And what Richie said about grooming, it's already happening. I mean, people were crying out. Now, a certain political party, one of their key things when they were campaigning a few months ago was the sex survey. That was a form of grooming, what the Scottish Government had thrown in for teenagers. So we need to speak up, we need to engage, we need to have a dialogue and say that you have to stop this. You need to, like I said, go out in the streets. You need to talk to people, and the parents need to, we need to gather the parents and petition the Scottish Government, not with emails, because frankly speaking, I'm done with emails. I've done that. I don't know about you, James, but I'm done with petitions as well, because they have this freedom of information, data protection. They make you wait for weeks and weeks. Parents are tearing their hair out because they don't know what to do. So we need the guidance. We need somebody to lead the way. So that's my take on it.
Thanks, Farah. Again, I watched the full clip. I checked out the women's details. I checked out some of the names that she was talking about and from the area. And they check out some of the stories. Again, it's all over. It just goes to show what we're talking about here, that there's safeguarding concerns at every possible turn. It never stops. So we should be aware of the possibilities of bad faith actors. We've not even spoke about think tanks and groups that have gained influence through, again, money.
Peter, a lot of these things have happened for decades because society doesn't give a shit about the most vulnerable people, like kids that get left into the care system who are probably going to have a life of crime and an early grave and all that sort of thing. And no one gives a shit because no one's like emotionally invested into them, because they've been like taken out of society and put into these group homes which aren't great for them, and they go on to like do stuff on the streets and like no one cares about them. But you should. Every child and every vulnerable person should be cared for. But it's the reason why Jimmy Savile got away with it. It's the reason why people have been getting away with it with decades. They target vulnerable people that are kind of forgotten. And I think when we have this whole conversation about gender affirmation care and safeguarding, we need to look at that bit too and bring it all in together. But as for the human trafficking thing, that is a very, very, very strange and uneven sort of field to get into, because how much of it can you verify? Not that saying again, like I know apparently now we've got more slaves now in globally than we ever have in history as a percentage for population, not in actual numbers. So I can believe it. I can certainly believe it. And I certainly believe that there are mechanisms at play that would allow it. But I don't think any of us are qualified to say if that is absolutely happening, like, or not.
Again, with irrefutable proof, you wouldn't want to be.
Well, even with refutable,
that,
even with refutable proof, if that was the case, then it would have to be embedded at every government layer. It would have to be, it would have to be so big and so raw that it would just be a mammoth thing. But again, I'm not doubting it. I'm not doubting it. It's just a hard one, right?
Absolutely not. And without being a conspiracy theorist, as Farah says, nobody knows what the cargo on the Ever Given cargo ship was. Right, Caroline, you've got your hand up there. I'll come to you.
Yeah, I think what Richie said about people not giving a shit, I think there is definitely an element of that. But in my experience, I would say it's more about people are really uncomfortable talking or thinking about children being sexually abused, so they avoid it. And I think that's why it is rife, and it has been going on for such a long time, way before Jimmy Savile. And I think that's how it continues to go, very often undetected, because people don't want to talk about it. And that's a great shame, because the whole time we don't want to talk about it and we don't get over our discomfort with it, you know, this is happening. And another thing about predators, it makes sense. Predators will go where they can access. I hate the word prey because it sounds so cold, but it's effectively their prey. So they become teachers, they become priests, they become doctors, children's entertainers, etc. This isn't rocket science. This is a basic knowledge that we've had for a long time. Yet you talk to your average person on the street and that information isn't relayed to them. A lot of people out there don't understand how predators operate. They're not your manky little old man and his dirty Mac. They are very often the pillars of the community. They will plan their whole life around access. These are the cold, hard facts. And we need to get that out to the public, I think, anyway.
And with that as well, the most likely person to offend is a person known to the child as well. And that needs to be said too. Not that you should be suspicious of all your family and friends, but, you know, be suspicious of somebody who wants to spend time alone with a kid that's not theirs and stuff like that, you know. Absolutely.
And as just touching on what Caroline says, and also the theme of the conversation, Shona Robinson came away with a statement that defies belief, to say that predators, I can't mind the word for word, but basically that they wouldn't try and just take any job, any vacation, any disguise to disguise themselves. And you're like, that's exactly what they would do. And this is a minister. I'm going to share something that Maren shared with us, a link that we were talking about earlier, which is the midwives at Napier University. And Maren, you've got your hand up, so if you want to just chat away while I'm showing this to the folks online. Maren? No?
I was still on mute.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so what she said was that predatory men have not had to pretend to be anything other than what they are. And it's bizarre because this is, as a statement, this is, of course, absolutely wrong, because some predatory men absolutely have to pretend to be something other than what they are, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to access victims. A large number of predators pretend to be something other than what they are because they want to get better access to victims or better hide their crimes so they can continue to have access to victims. So it's just, if she had tried to find the worst possible way to make a wrong statement, she really succeeded in that one. I mean, if we steelman her argument, what she really meant to say was predatory men have not had to pretend to be women in order to find victims. That would, of course, be an accurate statement. However, it's utterly pointless in the discussion we're having, because we're not talking about what they have to do to get access to victims. We're talking about what they do. And what they do indeed is dress up as women sometimes in order. Locally, we've had quite a few incidents of men being found guilty of voyeurism, dressing up as women to go into changing rooms or toilets to then film women and girls. And we know that research into sexual predators, pedophiles, rapists, murderers shows that one of the most frequently found fetishes, sexual paraphilias in these men, is cross-dressing. So to make this claim that they don't have to dress up as women in order to abuse, yeah, and it has absolutely no relevance to what we're talking about, because what we are talking about is how we safeguard women and children and how self-ID interferes with that safeguarding. But of course, that's not what she said. Sadly, she came out with an utterly incorrect statement, which made her look really illiterate when it comes to understanding predators and safeguarding.
Absolutely. Folks, we've run on past 9 o'clock, and we could have the conversation, we could talk about other things, we could expand this even further, but I don't want to take advantage of your good nature and the time that you've already given us. I'm grateful of that. I would like to thank each and every one of you for the time that you've put this evening, the contributions that you've made. I hope that it makes it easier for the viewers that joined us online, and the people that will watch it. If you do have any questions, please get in touch. So I just want to thank Kevin Lister, Maren Smith, James Esses, Caroline McAllister, Richie Herron, Lee from SOS Scotland, Farah Hamid, and Shelley Charlesworth from Transgender Trend for joining us this evening. I'm going to end the live stream here.